Using my own life as a springboard, I'll be exploring a template that I think many of you will find familiar for understanding the different progressions and stages of evolution, of growth from infancy to the present day, to our potential. So we start off in infancy in a completely dependent relationship. And I think this is the main kind of period of cultural programming. And the way that I look at this is the infant, beginning with tone and presence and, kind of looking at mass and looking at facial expressions and voice tones, begins to create a map of reality and their intersection with reality. And this is the point where there isn't a formed ego, there isn't a formed conscious mind yet in the child. And so the default mode, which I think makes a lot of sense, is to look out there and basically say to the giants that surround every infant, you're all big, you've been around for a while, you're not dead. And therefore, what you're doing, whatever it is that you're doing, thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, that leaves most of you, all of you that I see to be alive, must be working most of the time. Like if you're 40 years old and an infant looks at a 40-year-old, a good instinct would be that whatever pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that 40-year-old is engaged in and has engaged in has kept them alive for 40 years. That's not bad, by the way. There's a lot of programming that's dead on arrival. Right? You plug it in and it forgot to say breathe. And so you're dead before you get a few minutes out of the womb. You're dead because the program forgot to say breathe. Or it forgot to say move legs, or it forgot to say get out of the way of car, right? So it's a pretty good program. Anyone who's alive today is a pretty good program. And we know this because the best programmers in the world cannot give birth to anything with the capacity of a human being that can be, is functionally more valuable 40 years later, right? Because it's not just that you and I are alive. We're more useful today than we were when we were born. Right? Whereas, you might be able to buy a $2 million robot that has, some human features, but it's likely less useful in 40 years, right? It's, that's gone wrong, that's gone wrong. We are more useful 40 years later, right? That's a pretty good shelf life. And so it's not bad that an infant would look around at the giants that are surrounding it and say, I'm going to do that. Whatever it is you're thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, I'm going to do that. So and so this is where we take on code, we take on programs, we take on patterns, basically. Patterns of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. And our plate gets piled high. Now, the problem with anything, all patterns of energy, is they eventually move from asset to liability. Some things start out a liability, but in that open gate download of the cult code, the infant isn't, getting to filter out the viruses. They're just doing an innocent copy. Whatever's there goes here, right? It's just a straight hard drive copy. And there's no capacity to discernment. And that's generally better than nothing, right? The infant doesn't have any code and doesn't have the ability to filter. So taking on the code of people that are alive is better than nothing. And that's what the infant does. Now, this is called the state of sympathy. Now, moving along a little bit, we come to the adolescent. And the adolescent does have a thinking mind. And the adolescent looks at all this code, and not surprisingly, because a lot of it is unconscious code that has not been iterated for hundreds, tens of years, thousands of years. We've got code in our cult that has not been substantially iterated for thousands of years. Like, that's bad, punish it. So somebody does something that harms the culture, and we divert energy away from schools and various things that could help the culture in order to harm, to damage the person who damaged the culture. And people who damage the culture are damaged to begin with, right? Healthy people do not destroy their own lives and the environment around them. Intelligent people do not say, oh, this is a lovely forest in my backyard. Let me make it as ugly and unuseful as possible and spend my energy doing it. Because that seems like the thing to do. That's not a healthy, intelligent proposition. But people do that. And the response to that is, you're a damaged person, so we're going to damage you some more because you were damaged. I mean, it makes sense to us, right? But that's thousands of years old. And it's not necessarily the best code out there, but we just hand it off, right? Our kid is misbehaving, so we're going to slap them, hit them, do whatever it is, so that they will be healthier. We're going to damage them so that they will be healthier. And if what they don't do out of conscientiousness and intelligence, they will do out of fear of more damage. And that's how we'll have, a healthy, loving culture. So the adolescent's job and state is antithesis. Its job, having lived through the absurdity, the inefficiency, the cruelty of every cult in childhood, its job is to try and filter out the good pile and the bad pile, right? The adolescent does have critical thinking. And so its job is to say, that's nuts. That's unfair. That's a lie. That's hypocrisy. That's just dumb. That's a good idea, but it's a bad technique. That's bad. That's not right. You don't even know what it says in the dictionary. You don't even know what it says in Wikipedia. You just say this stuff, but it's nonsense. I looked it up, right? So the adolescent's job before moving into the adult stage is to identify all the stupidity, all the hypocrisy, all the lies, all the incompetence around it. And this is an incredibly important stage in evolution. Why? Well, what if every new model of computer was an exact copy of last year's model of computer? Every chip, the exact same chip as last year, with zero critical analysis, no upgrade in code, no upgrade in features, no upgrade in computer. It just, ta-da-ta-ta, we've got this year's model of computer, and we have included exactly what was there last year because this is perfect. It's perfect. Enjoy, right? The next 20 million years deal with Windows 95, right? Why question what works, right? So in order to question, in order to iterate, in order to evolve the code, you have got to go through the adolescent stage of critical thinking, of rebellion against the unconscious copying of the cult, the unconscious replication of the status quo, right? This is when a healthy parent, realizing how much they hate their parents who hit them and shamed them and did this, says, I'm not going to do that with my kids. Why? Because I don't want to live in a cult of hatred and shame and this, and those things produce that. And I understand why. I understand how tiny, small and humiliated I felt and how much I didn't want to feel that way. So if I have a child, no hitting, right? If I have a child and there's something wrong, I will point it out in private, not publicly humiliate my children in front of their classmates, et cetera, et cetera. So this is when the ideal is born, right? The adolescent rebels, the antithesis of what is, in favor of what's more beautiful, more good, more true, right? And, low-level adolescence in a low-level culture is just rebellion and hatred, right? I hate that. I don't like that. I want to get away from that. I want to get away from that. I want to get away from that. And that unfortunately, if you really take that to the extreme, then there's nothing left. The corrupt financial cult by the abusive, hypocritical people who slept their way into this and this, and they're friends with that, and the right person didn't get this, and the absurd educational system, and this, and the smog-producing cars. There's nothing left, right? The unsustainably built houses and the corrupt government officials and the taxes. There's nothing left, right? Because every single element of humanity, every system created by the cult of the conscious mind is imperfect. But it's the adolescent's job to identify what's imperfect, what's wrong, what's flawed with everything. And, in the extreme of that, just sulking in their room, but sulking in a house that is corrupt, with food filled with pesticides, by unfair parents, by a corrupt government, right? They're in that structure, right? And all the jobs are rotten and unfair and this and that and the other, and so you can't leave the family system because then you'd be part of the system, right? The corrupt, rotten, horrible system of what? Human existence, the imperial cults, whatever. You can't move. And so this kind of moves back towards center as we move towards adulthood, right? The adolescent's job is to legitimately, every single thing the adolescent sees is real. It is corrupt. It is falling apart. It is hypocritical. It is pathetic. It's all interlinked. It's bad for the ecology. It's not right. It was never fair, right? That's all true, right? The adolescent's job is to flag all of this for possible improvement. But it is the adult's job. The adolescent is an idealist. The child, it just accepts everything. Yes. The adolescent, in its purest form, just rejects everything. That's fucked up and that's fucked up. and this and this and this, and it's just I want nothing to do with it. But the adult's job is to piece this all back together again. And what it has to do is it's got a plate, just like the child, just like the adolescent. But the adult doesn't have the luxury of living in their parents' house, eating corrupt food from a corrupt system and not doing any chores, not making any money, the adult actually has to engage with the status quo. And what a useful adult does is it looks back in childhood at all, the adolescent threw it all out. The adult says, Mom did make some good pancakes. I've got to give her that. She made some good pancakes. I did like being out in nature and being out. That bit was good. The loneliness, the insanity, the lies and all that isolation. No, that wasn't so good. But nature itself was really nice. And organic vegetables, that wasn't so bad. Yes, they came in plastic wrapping, right? And the little tags that said organic weren't biodegradable, right? They said organic, they were the tag marking, but they weren't, they had chemicals on it and this and that. So, that's organic food better than not organic food. Learning skills better than not having any skills. But, why don't I learn to cook? And what if I learn to write and communicate my ideas? Writing isn't all bad, right? Writing, not bad. Arithmetic, subtraction, addition, not bad. So I'm going to identify everything that is best and necessary with what is, right? Money, it's kind of necessary. You can go to a place, you want to rent a place to build your tiny house. They want a credit card, linked right into the imperialist oil embezzling, corrupt system. It's just right into that, feeding the system. But they won't let you rent the tool to build your tiny house, all organic and all that, unless you have a credit card, right? So it is kind of nice not having to carry around thousands of dollars and, in cash and stuff. Sometimes they'll accept that, But, that's also part of the system, right? You have the White House stuck on there and imperialist men in the background, on the bills. So, you say, well, in order to create something new, in order to iterate, in order to evolve what is, I've got to work with the best of what was, right? We could just throw out the English language, right, and just start from scratch. Right? That's my protest of, the corruption of the English language. All of its emphasis on thoughts and being interesting rather than feelings and going with the flow, which, English people don't talk about that much. And so, but how do you change something that nobody can understand, right? So you've got to work with what is, right? You're always starting. Life doesn't get the opportunity to just say, oh, let's try a new Earth. Let's just delete that Earth and then ping, let's have a new Earth out of nothing. No, if life wants to evolve Earth, there's too much this, there's not enough that. Life has to start with where Earth is today, right? Life can evolve Earth, but the starting point, all the raw ingredients are what's going on right now. And the same is true for any human being, right? We have to start with what is, right? I am a this, with a that, with a this, with a that. And what can I do with it is the question, right? So the adult's job is to dream, is to imagine what could be better, preferably 10x better, right? Because it takes effort to change. Nobody likes to think. Nobody likes to change. And so if it's not 10 times better, most people aren't, I'll just do it the way it's always been done. And it was good enough for my parents. It's good enough for other people. It's good enough for me, right? I don't want to have to work and change that. But if you do something that's 10 times better, it delivers 10 times more pleasure than the status quo. If you do that, well, then people might want to reward you. They might want to join, right? And so usually good to think of something 10 times better than the status quo. The status quo is, burgers and fries for $6.99 at McDonald's, right? Better than nothing, right? There's plenty of people in the world that would love to have a burger and fries that do not have anything, that are in, migratory, refugees and in a desert and stuff. That's heaven for some people, right? But again and again and again, you tend to get a little fat, you tend to get a little dull. It's not the best thing for the arteries. So what could be 10 times better? Maybe for free or for $1.99, right? What about a fresh picked organic salad with what, right? Where's that oomph and energy and calories going to come from? And how do we design that, right? So that's the adult's job, is to figure out what can be 10 times better. And its also job is to delete the worst of what was, right? The stupidity, the hypocrisy, the blaming the child for the parent's mistakes, all of that type of thing, which is absolutely insane. It's the last thing we need to pass down intergenerationally. Is that's the way we handle it, right? All the big people blame and punish the small people for their problems that they're too stupid to understand, right? Let's get rid of that. And maybe the best we can do is just to say, you know what, you're right. Have teenagers do your best and say, you're right. Everything I do is wrong. But now it's your turn. Now it's your turn. Now, you don't have to prove that I'm wrong and the system is corrupt. You're absolutely right. So now you can get on with being an adult faster, which is you've got to take bits of all this corruption and failure and incompetence and stupidity. We all know how stupid I am. And then you've got to make it better. And then you've got to listen to your kids point out the same thing and maybe make it even easier, right? Maybe be less stupid than me so that they have less things they can point out. But it is the job, in evolutionary terms, of the adolescent to identify the imperfections that exist in every human activity, in every human thought, in every human philosophy, right? The ego, the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. That at a micro level is the ego and at a macro level is the culture. That is flawed. It's wrong. It's got endless blocks in energy and contradictions and fuzzinesses and, the left hand doing this and the right hand doing that. It's just filled with that. So, if you teach that to your teenager rather than that we know what's best for you and all that, you don't, right? You know what's better than, laying around doing nothing or killing each other on the spot, but you do not know what's best, right? You may or may not know better than, you know better than a child, right? But you may not know better than your adolescent what best, but you may not know how to do it, right? But you can be more honest than a cult. A few hundred years ago, our cult said, children should be seen and not heard. Now they can be heard, but punished for talking back. What if they're heard and validated, but get working on the problems of the cult faster. You're absolutely right, I'm a hypocrite in this area. And you're absolutely right, I don't shame myself in public when I'm irritated with myself, right? And you're absolutely right that this and that is going on. And you're absolutely right that I'm giving tax money to a corrupt government because I don't know what else to do, right? So what's your plan, right? So this is evolution's key moment of iteration, right? There is a better plan. Somebody has to invent it, right? And life's betting on 8 billion human beings, that there's a few of them in there, doesn't need everyone, that a few of them are going to get it right and are going to be proof of concept and are going to go on to create amazing things. That's life's bet, Life may not have had a lot of confidence in 100 humans, in 1,000 humans, right? But life doesn't take any chances, right? 8 billion humans and counting, one of them's going to get it right, And all they have to do is have children, and then people will start copying what works, right? If they can't kill it and sabotage it for ruining, their own little myopia of a dysfunctional status quo. So the adult has to figure this all out. And so, it creates a new pattern, right? That is unique. Hopefully, with the best, take the best of what was, the pancakes, the organic gardening, the shovels. They're a great invention, shovels, Maybe shovels with non-break handles that, can be left out in the rain, since kids seem to do that. And they're better than the old shovels that rotted, right? And then, the English language, not too bad. Beautiful gardens, right? Maybe more beautiful gardens, but, certainly let's keep beautiful gardens. We don't need to throw out all beauty. Hot water, not a bad invention. Cold water, cleaner water, air, filters. These are great things. Like, let's take those and let's get rid of the worst things and let's iterate those worst things into better things. Now, reality is really, really big. The psyche, the self, is really, really big. Culture is really, really big. And so no adult, no individual can change the entire system. To attempt to is to become a martyr, filled with self-pity, overwhelmed, burdened with things you can't fix because, this would be a better language than that, but nobody's speaking it. That's a better way to eat than that, but, I have to keep spending all this time explaining it to people, and then they don't bother explaining it to other people, and the meme dies out. And so it's, a good rate of return for one generation, if we're in service to life, is 30%. If you take 30% of the worst of what was, racism, bigotry, various forms of stupidity, if you take 30% of that, my parents were radical racists. I'm just a racist in my part-time, right? I've gotten 50% of that racism out of there. Plus I've reduced the sugar content in my children's diet. Plus I've done that. That's a 50% return, meaning life, in the form of human beings, are getting 50% more intelligent in one generation. That's a good return, right? It's not the best return possible, but on balance, if every generation human beings become 50% more intelligent, well, give us 1,000,000 years and we're unrecognizable, right? 1,000,000 years from now, with every 20 years, a new 50% improvement, it's not the best. Some people can do thousands of percent in a generation. But that's a very, very, very tiny minority. We're dealing with less than 1% of 1% of the population that can take the status quo and make it thousands of percent better in themselves in one generation. It's often called Enlightenment, where you just aren't attached to all of that clutter that was given to you. And everything you do is with the new eyes of grace, the new eyes of innocence. It's thousands of percent better in all areas. Those come around, every 1,000 years ago or so, right? Jesus, and it's often quite disruptive and upsetting for everyone else, because most people can't change at the rate of thousands of percent per year or per decade, right? So, it creates this conflict between the people that can only change very, very slowly and this 1,000% force, right? That's, mom and dad at age 75 aren't ready for email, aren't ready for doing their taxes online with Face ID and this authentication and discovering what is and isn't spam mail. There never used to be so much spam mail where one click could open up your bank account and do this and all your money's gone. That didn't used to happen. You went in, they recognized you at the bank, and they said, "Hello, Mrs. Smith," and gave you your money, and they didn't give all your money to some stranger in Russia, or Ghana or whatever it is. This didn't happen, right? But now, someone calls up, my password is broken, and I have to talk to them, and then they wanted this information, and then there's no money in my account, right? So it's too fast, in other words, right? It's too fast for some people, right? It could work really well, but the conscious mind just can't keep up with it, right? And it's very upsetting. It's very disorienting, right? So on average, if a generation can get 10, 20, 30%, 40%, 50% better, more intelligent, meaning they create more sustainable well-being while consuming less energy, then we're doing great, right? And we are not doing great as a cult. Our energy expenditure is expanding, and many dimensions of our well-being are decreasing. Like we're expending more time, money, and natural resources to create less well-being in a number of areas, right? And this is a beautiful opportunity for the adolescent to say, hey, that's all fucked up. Don't do that. The more hours you spend on Facebook, the more miserable you are. Stop doing that. Go plant your garden, spend time with your kids, do yoga. No, I've got to do this and I've got to like this and respond to this. No, don't do it, right? Stop spending energy on things that make you miserable. Contain the bleed of endless energy consumption. And focus that energy on things that make you feel sustainably happier, right? So that's the journey of a generation, right? And then to give birth to the next generation who will unconsciously accept all of the benefit and all of the detritus and all of the stupidity that we give them. Will experience the cruelty and the pain of doing so as they grow up and hit this wall and hit that wall and shame themselves and don't understand this and all that because we're not very intelligent. And then the adolescent, thankfully, is going to come in and criticize every last bit of it, but not have the ability to do much about it, right? But that creates the clarity so that by the time we become an adult, we can remember all the criticisms of the adolescent and learn from them and say, I don't know a better way to transact energy than cash and money, but I do know a better way to spend the money, right? Listen to the adolescent, but, not withdraw from life, right? But iterate it. What can be iterated? Grow from it, learn from it, and create something a little bit better than we were born with, and serve evolution in the process.